Very good morning, afternoon, and evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Food and Agriculture thematic session of the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. My name is Jennifer Clyde, your host for this session, and it is a great honor and pleasure to be a part of this meaningful event. Considering the challenges we face today, apart from the COVID-19 pandemic, including climate change and food insecurity, I am sure we all agree that a transformation of agriculture and food systems is needed to achieve the 2030 Sustainable Agenda, and in particular, SDG 2, Zero Hunger. Under this context, we are joined by representatives from relevant stakeholders, ranging from the government, IGO, private sector, civil society, and academia today, to discuss a way forward for resilient and sustainable agriculture and food systems. The session is divided into two parts: the P4G Hub-led session focusing on partnerships, and the following panel discussion on two pressing topics in sustainable agriculture and food systems and net zero carbon emissions. Without further ado, I would like to open the session and welcome our keynote speakers. Chi Dong-ri, Director General of Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Agnes Kalibata, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for 2021 UN Food Systems Summit. Rasmus Prehn, Minister for Food, Agriculture and Fisheries of Denmark. And Kim Hyun-soo, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Republic of Korea.
Honorable Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I congratulate the Republic of Korea for hosting this timely event and thanks Minister Kim Yong-soo for inviting me to speak. Distinguished delegates, considerable progress has been made in addressing world hunger over the past decades, but the world is facing multiple global challenges today. The COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, the loss of biodiversity, as well as conflict, fragilities, and socio-economic disturbance. The 2021 Global Report on Food Crisis launched by FAO and partners this month is clear. In 2020, 155 million people living in 55 countries and territories were estimated to be acutely food insecurity and in need of the urgent assistance. This is the highest level of food insecurity in the past 5 years and represents an increase of 20 million people compared to 2019, pushing the world further away from achieving the Sustainable Development Goal 2. To addressing food insecurity and the food crisis, it is necessary to understand the root causes, leverage investment, coordinate international effort, and promote partnerships at all levels. A systematic approach is essential for securing development gains in the fight against hunger and poverty, but also for the progressing on the delivery of all other SDGs. The role of agri-food systems in achieving the SDGs have never been as critical as it is today. FAO's strategic framework for the next decade seeks to support the 2030 agenda through the transformation to more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. Together with its partners, FAO is supporting public, private, and community actors at all levels to manage multiple risks, crises that together threaten and affect the diverse agri-food systems. This is done through the investment and partnerships in complementary and mutually supportive disaster and climate risk management interventions. The need to respond to the COVID-19 crisis presents real opportunity to drive long-term economic and social transformation. Hence, the importance of supporting the and scaling up green and climate-friendly recovery, especially for the agri-food sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, FAO is using innovative approaches and strengthening partnerships with all stakeholders. The FAO COVID-19 Response and Recovery Program is expanding its area to better integrate the components of a green recovery. FAO country-led and country-owned hand-in-hand initiative continues to gain strength as a mechanism for bringing diverse actors together to have the least advantage. The initiative uses cutting-edge technology and matchmaking to eradicate poverty and hunger and malnutrition and reducing inequalities within and among nations. We are also building resilience and creating opportunities for women and youth across agri-food systems. Ladies and gentlemen, transforming our agri-food systems requires innovative thinking and acting beyond sectors' boundaries. It also requires a high-level commitment and decisive leadership, as well as a coalition to actors ready to support the changes needed. Today's P4G breakout session on agriculture provides a strong momentum to share good experience and take a big step forward. In addition, 2021 is full of the opportunities to join the forces of all partners. Those include the UN Food System Summit, Biodiversity Convention, the G20 Summit, the Climate Change Convention, and FAO Conference. On these occasions, I look forward to working closely with the P4G members country and partners to translate our common vision of a world free of poverty and hunger into action. Thank you.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by thanking the Republic of Korea and Partnering for Green Growth for inviting me to participate in the 2021 P4G Seoul Summit. The summit is indeed timely as this year presents an opportunity for us to harness energy and action towards transitioning our food systems and building back better following the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have learned throughout this pandemic that no one is safe until we are all safe, and that without improved food systems that provide nourishment, income, and equality, we are all just one crisis away from extreme vulnerability. Our food systems face multiple challenges. The UN projects that our population will grow by 43% to 10 billion by 2050. This requires us to step out of our comfort zone to transform our food systems as we look to stay ahead of this growth. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 pandemic has tremendously slowed down our progress, and we risk reversal on the 2030 development agenda. In addition, climate change is limiting our abilities to achieve our targets. That's why the UN Secretary General launched the 2021 Food Systems Summit to catalyze action and to get us back on track. The summit's key priority is to deliver on the 2030 agenda while addressing the challenges of our food system. We need now more than ever before to establish resilient and sustainable agriculture and food systems. On this path, we can leverage the possibility for further cooperation in climate change, mitigation efforts, public-private partnerships, and innovative technologies to build back better and greener in this decade of action. At today's annual P4G Seoul Summit, our focus is to explore how we can enact a global transformational change and develop sustainable and resilient agri-food systems. As we go into discussions, I would like us to have a few things in mind. First, it needs to be clear to us that our food systems thrive on nature. We must therefore shift from food systems which are only extracting from nature, learning instead to produce food in ways that benefit nature. Our food systems are the largest contributors to biodiversity loss. This calls for our collective action in exploring and implementing interventions to restore and conserve our natural ecosystem and biodiversity. This forum has the opportunity to provide key insights to the work of the 2021 Food System Summit by bringing in key stakeholders to explore game-changing solutions that deliver food production systems that work for both people and planet. Secondly, it's important to note that the sustainable management of our food systems is in our hands. As we deliberate today on innovative solutions to bring together agri-food systems and biodiversity action, it will be good to remember that these solutions need to be backed up by science, as it is the only way we can assess the impact of our action and ensure that we are on the right trajectory. Through the P4G Seoul Summit, the Food System Free Summit in July, and the summit in September, we have opportunities for further collaboration. I believe we will identify and agree on workable solutions that will transform and strengthen the resilience of our food systems. Thank you once again for the invitation and for the strong leadership and support for the 2021 Food Systems Summit. I look forward to our continued collaboration and collective action towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and I thank you again for inviting me.
Ladies and gentlemen from around the world, we live in a globalized world, now more than ever. This affects our lives in many ways, and it affects the way we produce and consume our food. Denmark is both a major importer and exporter of food. We are part of the global food system, and let us be honest, this is not without problems. We need to find solutions for biodiversity, climate emission and deforestation, just to name a few of the problems. And the world population is growing and people get wealthier. More and better food is needed. Our planet has enough resources to feed us all if we do it right. But we have to act. It will require innovation. And it will require global collaboration. Hopefully, we have learned an important lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic. When we focus our efforts, we can make huge progress in a very short time. Public and private actors have been able to raise financing and launch collaboration that has given us new vaccines within a year. It is remarkable what we can actually achieve when we really put our minds to it. We need massive investment in new and innovative technologies in all countries, rich and poor, and in this respect, enhancing cooperation between public and private partners is key. Partnerships for green growth is the mission of P4G. It should be the mission for all of us. In Denmark, we have a strong tradition for using partnerships to tackle challenges, such as the green transition for the food sector. The Danish think tank, 1/3, who work with the prevention of food loss and waste, is an example of the Danish approach. The think tank gathers more than 50 stakeholders along the food value chain and aims to find solutions for food loss and waste and to facilitate concrete action. In general, we are trying to lead the way for a rapid green transition in all sectors. The Danish government has set an ambitious goal to reduce the national Danish climate emission by 70% by 2030 compared to 1990. And we have made it into law. To reach our 70% goal, we need solutions. Last year we launched Green Solutions for the Future, a new strategy for investments in green research, technology and innovation, including the agricultural sector. The strategy aims to form partnerships between research institutions and the business community, and thereby pool investments. Currently, I am in the middle of political negotiations on how to accelerate the green transition of the Danish agricultural sector. An important element will be to take lowland soils out of use. Another is developing a new regulation model which will be crucial in sustaining a cost-efficient green transition of the sector. Denmark is also highly engaged in the preparation of the UN Food System Summit in September. In our view, the summit must deliver specific and scalable results and progress towards all sustainable development goals. In April this year, we hosted the 5th annual World Food Summit with more than 300 participants from government, business, academia, and civil society. I would like to thank Dr. Agnes Kalibata, UN Special Envoy to the 2021 Food System Summit, and co-speaker today for her active participation. Finally, I would like to thank the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs of the Republic of Korea for hosting this thematic discussion on resilient and sustainable agriculture and food systems. It is a very timely discussion. The current pandemic is a challenge to us all, but it could also be an opportunity to build back better after the pandemic. It gives us a chance to revisit the way we do things, to ensure a more sustainable food production, a chance to increase food security and deal with malnutrition. There are no easy solutions, no easy fix, and the journey will take time. But we have set the course and the first steps have been taken. Now we have to keep the momentum. Thank you.
안녕하십니까. 대한민국 농식품부 장관 김현수입니다. P4G 식량농업 세션에 참여해 주신 모든 분들께 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 이 세션은 기후위기 시대에 인류의 생존과 직결되는 먹거리를 어떻게 생산하고 소비해야 하는지 논의하는 자리입니다. 시간을 2050년으로 맞춘다면 미래의 인류는 2021년을 어떻게 회상할까요? 코로나19 팬데믹을 먼저 기억할 것입니다. 이러한 세계적인 보건 위기가 식량 위기로 전이되지 않도록 국제사회는 함께 힘을 모으고 있습니다. G20 국가들도 무분별한 농산물 수출 제한 조치의 자제를 촉구하면서 식량 위기 대응을 위해 공조하고 있습니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 전 세계의 기아 인구는 최근에 크게 늘었습니다. 식량농업기구에 따르면 세계 기아 인구는 2020년에 1억 3천만 명이 증가했습니다. 식량 안보가 확보되지 않은 개도국 취약계층의 삶은 계속 위협받고 있습니다. 그러나 코로나19보다도 기후위기로 인해서 더 심각한 식량 위기가 올 수 있음을 경계해야 합니다. 세계 기상기구에 따르면 2020년은 기후 역사에 있어서 최악으로 기록될 만한 한 해였습니다. 산불, 태풍, 홍수 등으로 많은 사람들이 생활의 터전을 잃고 식량 부족 위기에 처했습니다. 기후위기가 식량위기가 되지 않도록 막기 위해서는 그 어느 때보다 국가별 노력과 글로벌 협력을 강화해야 합니다. 이제 탄소 중립은 세계적인 흐름이 되었습니다. 2050년이 먼 미래처럼 보일 수 있지만 사실은 그렇지 않습니다. 온실가스 배출량과 흡수량이 일치하려면 앞으로 30년간 상당한 양의 온실가스 감축이 이루어져야 합니다. 2015년 파리 기후변화 협약을 채택한 이래 세계 각국은 탄소 중립 선언을 하였습니다. P4G는 기후변화, 기아종식 등 우리 시대의 시급한 과제 해결을 위해 민간기업, 시민사회, 정부기관 등 국제사회의 힘을 모으고 개발도상국을 포함한 전 세계인의 희망을 찾고자 하는 포용적 연대입니다. 모두의 실천을 바탕으로 한 국제사회의 다양한 파트너십은 탄소중립 비전 실현을 촉진할 것입니다. 전 세계적으로 기후위기를 극복하고자 하는 탄소중립은 농업, 농촌 분야에도 중대한 도전이자 기회가 될 것입니다. 한국 정부도 작년에 2050 탄소중립 실현을 목표로 한 저탄소 발전 전략을 수립하였습니다. 농업, 농촌 분야도 탄소중립 달성을 위한 로드맵을 마련하고 있습니다. 지금까지의 농업이 기후변화에 대응한 점진적 변화 과정이었다면 앞으로의 농업은 농식품의 생산, 유통, 소비의 전 과정에서 온실가스를 보다 적극적으로 감축하는 혁신적 변화 과정이어야 합니다. 이를 위해선 농업 생산에 사용되는 물, 비료, 농약 등의 생산 요소 투입량을 줄이는 이른바 저탄소 정밀 농업이 필요합니다. 유리온실 등 시설을 활용한 농업 생산의 경우 화석연료 의존도를 낮추고 신재생에너지 활용을 늘려가야 합니다. 가축 사육 과정에서는 메탄가스 발생량을 줄이는 사료를 개발, 사용하고 가축 분뇨를 자원화하거나 정화 처리하는 능력을 제고해 나가야 합니다. 농식품 유통 소비 과정에서도 식품 손실이 최소화되도록 우리의 행동을 바꾸어 나가야 합니다. 이러한 노력들을 한데 모아서 지속 가능하고 회복력 있는 농업과 식품 시스템을 발전시켜 나갈 필요가 있습니다. 오늘 이 자리가 기후변화가 가져올 위기에 대해 심각하게 고민하고 미래에 우리가 같이 해결해야 할 과제에 대해 공감하는 시간이 되길 기대합니다. 대한민국은 농업, 농촌 분야에서 탄소 중립 목표를 달성할 수 있도록 앞장서서 노력하고 여러 방면에서 국제 협력을 강화해 나갈 것입니다. P4G 서울 정상회의 식량농업 세션에 참여해 주신 분들께 다시 한번 감사드리며 모두의 건강과 행복을 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
I would like to convey my gratitude to all the speakers for your messages and remarks in which you echoed that the P4G Seoul Summit and Food and Agriculture Session serves as an important and timely platform for discussion at this critical juncture, where we must take initiatives for a better future. We will continue with the next part of today's program, which is led by the P4G Hub. This session will focus on the on-the-ground delivery of the SDGs through innovative solutions. I will now hand the floor over to the moderator of the P4G Hub session, Claire Neller, Head, International Food Program, Waste and Resources Action Program.
Thank you, Ms. Clyde, and welcome everyone to the P4G session on food and agriculture. My name is Claire Neller, and I'm head of the International Food Program at WRAP. And I'm just going to start with a few facts about our food system globally, and some of these are pretty shocking. So, a third of the world's greenhouse gas emissions comes from our food system, and yet we waste around a third of the food that we produce globally. And this is at a time when around 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night, and millions of people who produce the food that we eat are vulnerable to the increasing impacts of climate change. We need to fundamentally transform our food system to make it more resilient and make progress towards a net zero future. That future is not possible without a resilient and climate smart food system. We also need to ensure that any solution or solutions that we provide are built to deliver change in developing countries as well as developed, and that is really relevant to their priorities. I am extremely excited to have such an esteemed group of speakers participating in today's discussion. And before I introduce them, I'd just like to kick off our session with a brief video from P4G that just shares an overview of P4G's work in this space and the innovative market-based solutions, including RAP's project, that P4G is scaling. So please play the video.
Our food system affects our health, our environment, and our economies. It is also responsible for around 1/3 of global emissions.
We need a fundamental transformation of the food system to make it more inclusive and resilient. Platforms like P4G deliver new business and finance models that can rapidly advance the goals of global coalitions like Champions 12.3 and the Food and Land Use Coalition.
P4G partnerships are commercially viable models of change, reducing food loss and waste, improving the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, enhancing food security, and building resilience in our food system.
Through the P4G partnership, halving food loss and waste by leveraging economic systems, or flawless, we are uniting corporations around ambitious voluntary agreements and developing replicable models in Mexico, Indonesia, and South Africa to monetize the savings from reducing food loss and waste.
P4G Sustainable Sourcing at Scale partnership with IDH is helping drive capital investment to rural areas in India. By implementing verified sourcing area, it is linking sustainability coalitions directly with buyers through an online platform called SourceUp. This is a model that can be replicated nicely with other P4G countries.
P4G is a global platform delivering transformative impact. With a pipeline of more than 50 partnerships and a global ecosystem spanning 12 country partners, 5 organizational partners, and more than 240 business and civil society partners. Join us in pioneering green partnerships and investing in impact.
Thank you. That was a really excellent example of some of the really pioneering partnerships that P4G is supporting. I'm now thrilled to go to our keynote speakers, and the first of those is Minister Choi from the Korean Forest Service, and I'm delighted to welcome you. And what I'm going to ask you is the same as I'm going to ask all of our keynote speakers today, which is to just share a little bit with us in your 3 minutes about how you're building momentum to transform food systems and how P4G can help scale that vision. So, Minister Choi, over to you.
Distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Choi Byung-am, Minister of the Korea Forest Service. Thank you for inviting me to the session on SDG 2, Food and Agriculture, which is the first main sector of the P4G Summit. While agriculture provides a livelihood for billions of people, it is facing serious challenges such as increasing natural disasters and new pests due to climate change, which threaten food security. Also, land use change and forestry sector, including agriculture and forestry, accounts for 23% of the global greenhouse gas emission. Rising population is expanding the area of residence and the farmlands. Therefore, we need a solution to balance sustainable and resilient agriculture and forest ecosystem protection. In March last year, a project suggested by the Korea Forest Service and other partners from Ethiopia was selected as a P4G partnership startup project. This project aims to build a traditional style shade-grown coffee farm and restore forest ecosystem in southern Ethiopia, an area getting drier. This is the ideal agroforestry business model, that combines agriculture and forest restoration. In this project, SK Forest, a Korean enterprise that is active in performing ESG activities, will manage forest restoration. Tree Planet, a social enterprise, will operate crowdfunding and global coffee marketing. The Ethiopian partners will be in charge of capacity building, job creation, and fair trade of local communities. The idea of this project started from the Seoul summit between Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and Korean President Moon Jae-in in August 2019. Ethiopia signed a peace agreement with Eritrea to end the long years of conflict. Now it is promoting 9 billion tree planting campaign to fight climate change. During his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech in December 2019, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said, "For me, nurturing peace is like planting and growing trees." It is my great honor to participate in the P4G summit and introduce the project promoted together by public and private sector of both Korea and Ethiopia. I am confident that the success of this project will replicate this business model to other major coffee producers such as Kenya, Vietnam, Colombia, and Indonesia. In closing, I would like to invite you to an event that holds great value and meaning. The Korea Forest Service and the FAO are hosting the 15th World Forestry Congress in May next year. It is the biggest international event in the forestry sector that is held every 6 years. I sincerely hope that next year's World Forestry Congress will be the first event for all international forestry leaders and experts together after the pandemic is over. I look forward to your special interest and participation in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Choi. Really wonderful example there of the intrinsic link between deforestation and sustainable food systems, and a really wonderfully ambitious project. 9 billion trees is just absolutely amazing. And I highly recommend that you also investigate the event in Korea next year. I'm now going to go to our second keynote speaker, Bas Reuter, who is the Director of Sustainability for Rabobank. Bas, over to you.
Many thanks, Claire, and a true honor to be able to present some of the examples we hope to produce in order to live up to this important challenge we jointly face. To us, food loss and waste is not just an important topic to work on, it's also an investment opportunity, because we think if we can turn waste into an investable asset, we can actually speed up the development of solutions. And that is why we designed the SDG 12.3 loan, which is a product that actually hopes to accelerate investments in tackling food loss and waste issues. And the reason we do it is because it provides us and our clients with a global financial solution that rewards positive accomplishments and sanctions underperformance, and as a result, stimulates the development in the right direction. An important element of the product is that it includes setting ambitious targets, measurement properly, and action on the ground. And the product is specifically designed for corporate clients in the food and agriculture space that have clear KPIs on food loss and waste reduction, including champions in the 12.3 companies who could actually benefit, but also, for instance, large players who may be member of the the Consumer Goods Forum, are also signatories to REP. So we definitely see a market for these products going forward. And what it entails is the fact that we have a standardized plug-and-play proposition that targets food loss and waste reduction based on very clear, outlined sustainability-linked loan principles, which can be a general purpose loan, but it can also be a very product or project-oriented dedication of the money. We use standardized metrics for KPIs. The methodology is in line with the food loss and waste accounting and reporting standard and therefore credible to the market. And we use assurance methods for the KPI performance through specialized networks, including REP, including Wageningen University, and including WRI. So that is how it's designed. And I'm also delighted to say that it's already on the market, because we've been able to convince one of our larger clients in the retail space, which offers its services under the retail brand of Ecoplaza, which is a sustainable supermarket chain, to actually use a 12.3 loan to actually diminish their food loss and waste, measure it, and get rewards for it. Now, by doing so, we hope to be able to actually speed up the development into food loss and waste reduction by creating market incentives to do the right thing. And in doing so, we take the opportunity to partner with the P4G Flawless Partnership to help create a market for food loss and waste reduction, and with financial products that speed up this development, and we are delighted to participate. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much, Baz. It's wonderful to be working with you in the Flawless Partnership, and yes, having that plug and play solution is something that we're really super excited to be working with you on. I am delighted now to introduce our panel and move to the panel discussion section. We have three wonderful speakers on our panel today. Just going to very quickly introduce them before I go to our first question. Bruno Oleohoek, the Managing Director and Chairman for East and Southern African region for Nestlé. Welcome, Bruno. Dan Vensing, the CEO of IDH. I'm so glad you could join us. And Charlotte Sorensen, Senior Project Manager from Arla Foods Ingredients. So thank you all three of you for joining us today. I'm going to ask our first question, and then maybe if we can go in the order that I introduce you. So Bruno, Dan, and then Charlotte. So the first question for you is, what innovative solutions are you involved with that is really serving to unlock investment for transformative change in the food systems? Bruno, let me come to you first.
So good day, everyone. And as introduced, my name is Bruno Liu, the Managing Director for Nestlé in the East and Southern Africa region, which is a region comprising of 23 countries from the Horn of Africa right down to South Africa and including the Indian Ocean Islands. But today I'm also representing the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa, which is an industry association that represents retail and manufacturing member companies. I'm a board member, and Nestlé is an active and long-standing member of the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa. So we launched the South African Food Loss and Waste Voluntary Agreement back in September 2020. And this agreement commits all of our members to reduce the food waste to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal to halve the global waste by 2030. So this initiative was launched by the Consumer Goods Council South Africa, but in partnership with the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, as well as the Department of Environmental Affairs, Forestry and Fisheries. And so we've been working on the topic in different dialogues and workshops actually since 2015. And in 2018, also a study tour was conducted in Europe to engage with other organizations that have implemented similar programs to reduce food waste and to share best practices for implementation and trial in South Africa. So actually, the whole initiative started based on the realities on the ground, which is food insecurity. In South Africa alone, about 6.6 million South Africans still routinely experience hunger, and a further 13.6 million have limited access to food. And at the same time, we've got 12.6 million tons of food that go to waste, which is, in our case, also about a third of the total food production. And out of this waste, 80% is still deemed edible. So this food could have been redistributed to all the people in need. So therefore, it's really this reality on the ground that made it impossible to ignore, and that got this initiative to be widely embraced by many companies. Another key contributor in South Africa to this wide-scale corporate commitment was the support of the two partner ministries that I mentioned, and this endorsement signals that we got from the highest level in government really inspired the private sector to also come on board and play its part. So promising uptake by manufacturers and retailers alike. Some of the biggest retailers and manufacturers are present, but what is pleasing is to also see that the smaller, more local independent players are signing up to this initiative. And therefore it makes us really a truly entire value chain that is participating. Many retailers and many manufacturers had their own programs before, but now it's obviously coordinated into a more holistic approach and really looking end-to-end in the value chain. So there's a really a concerted drive to make sure that we go beyond the signing of in a ceremony and to make it really a practical implementation. So we're still in the early days, but we've been focusing on setting up the foundation and in the beginning also focus on knowledge and capability building amongst the members through technical experts, including from the P4G. And so we have now 3 work streams with working groups and committees, one on food donations, one on measurement, and one on reporting and policy standards. So through this initiative, the Consumer Goods Council South Africa is coordinating the food surplus that is still safe for human consumption, and then to donate it to the needy as part of the national goals to avoid and avert food insecurity in South Africa.
Thank you so much, Bruno. It's wonderful to hear of the progress that's being made in South Africa. I think, taking the model of the pre-competitive collaborative space, the voluntary agreement that we use in the UK, bringing that to the South African context, working with CGCSA has been wonderful, and I'm so excited to see how that progresses. I know the working groups have been absolutely fantastic so far, and really, really positive feedback from the businesses that are participating. Thank you so much. Let me come to you now, Dan, and I'll just reiterate that question in case you've forgotten. So what innovative solutions are you involved with that are really unlocking investment for transformative food systems?
Great. Thank you, Claire. Thanks for having us, and also thanks for P4G for having us today. And I think indeed the subject is crucially important. At IDH, Sustainable Trade Initiative, we have been working since our inception about 12 years ago exactly on that, transforming the food and agri system. And with our roots in the Netherlands and also with P4G supporters of the Netherlands and Denmark and others, we have been working on that. And our sole mandate is to bring the private sector to the SDG agenda, and specifically on the transformation of the food and agri sector. And over the last 12 years, we've been able to already mobilize just short of 400 million of private sector investment in that transformation, benefiting over 4 million farmers and reaching over millions of hectares of arable land to really transform that system. at the same time, we also realize that it's not enough, that these numbers, they're quite big. But if we really talk about the transformation of the system, much more is needed. And that is why innovation is always at the heart of what we do with our partners, because for us, we are a public-private partnership facility. So we always need to work in partnership with private sector, with government, other stakeholders to make it work. Basically how also Bruno was explaining the work in South Africa and beyond. And specifically, one of those innovations that I want to touch upon is a model that we call Source Up, which is a platform that links markets, so retailers, brands, with jurisdictions around the world producing key commodities and food crops, and making connections between those players in the production areas with the end markets. That is the whole beauty of creating this global partnership, this global platform of exchange, which is supported by data. Data is, of course, the new trendsetter in sustainability and in the transformation of the system. And we feel that relentless transparency there is important to see how the market is performing and how the production is transforming, and then linking that together. To us, that is key. And one of the areas where we are testing this new system is in India, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, where in the partnership with P4G, we have created what we call compacts, or at the level of a jurisdiction, brought together all the stakeholders to collectively transform the food system to the benefit of people, of nature, and of course, the economy. That is the whole idea. And this innovation is not only for India. As I talked about it before, Source Up is a global platform. So we also want to scale it to other countries like Vietnam, and it's already happening there, like to Kenya, Colombia, Ethiopia, Indonesia, so that this really is a global platform, but also link it to markets in Europe, in India, in China, in many other places around the world, because then we really get the transformation that we're after.
Thank you so much, Dan. It's so exciting to hear about the project and that link between the small scale farmers, but the scale at which you're able to deliver the change is so inspiring. And I think one of the huge challenges of the work that we do across the food system is how do we bring every scale of production into it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Charlotte, let's come to you now, just for your kind of 2 minutes on what you're doing at Arla Food Ingredients on that kind of transformative change. Over to you.
Thank you, Claire. I'm honored for getting the opportunity to present the Sustainable Food Platform project. It's about protein-rich biscuit based on local crops. So biscuits are popular in Ethiopia. It's an accessible snack. With funding from the P4G, we have in the platform partners we are now able to work to enable local production of a healthier biscuit made with locally grown crops, and then with a little bit of whey ingredients. It is a product based on reverse engineering, so it's very much about starting with identifying consumer needs, the preferences, the maximum price, and then working backwards to develop a nutritious food product within this framework. This partnership is redefining the nutrition in biscuits consumed by school children and consumed by refugees. It strengthens the local production in Ethiopia and potentially also address malnutrition and food insecurity in the country. We are keen to see this solution to scale, first in Ethiopia, but also later on in countries like Kenya, Malawi, Rwanda, where they're also eating biscuits, and they have similar issues with malnutrition and food insecurity. So this is very much about working together, public, private companies and the institutions, and then to deliver locally produced food for the people who need it the most. Over to you again, Claire.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yes, that's absolutely wonderful. The project that you're doing there with the biscuits is just fantastic, and that kind of the food security angle is so important. And I think, COVID has really demonstrated some of those huge challenges with resilience in our food system. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to come to our second question now. I am going to challenge you all to keep your answers short and sweet for 2 minutes. But our second question definitely links to the first and really plays into the P4G agenda around scaling. So what I want to ask you is, how do you think a platform, or can you share how a platform like P4G can really help you scale your solution? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to you in reverse order this time. So Charlotte, let's come straight back to you just to talk a little bit more about that scaling factor.
Okay, great. An important element in success for sustainable transformation, that's all the activities and engagement to enable the business environment, and also to resolve all the challenges in the value chain. So we need close collaboration and knowledge sharing with key stakeholders. And an example is the opportunity we have got with the P4G platform to work with the Ethiopian government stakeholders to develop the first Ethiopian nutrition standard for fortified biscuit. With such a standard, the rollout of the biscuit will be much more efficient and also sustainable. So we are very excited to scale this beyond Ethiopia. And we also do hope that we can engage with the P4G ecosystem in Africa, but also in Asia. So this partnership can potentially move into large-scale production by linking to other P4G partnerships, like the work on sustainable industrial clusters in Ethiopia. So it's truly partnership and engagement, multi-partner collaborations, locally anchored, and then for sustainable transformation of the food systems.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Dan, I'm going to come to you and then to Bruno. We're tight on time, so I'm going to keep you to 1 minute to talk about a little bit about how the P4G grouping can help you scale your solution. Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Claire. Now, I think P4G can really help us by linking us to all the P4G initiatives around the world so that they can be featured on the Source Hub platform. And on top of that, also link us to the company partners and others at the market end so that we really create that connection and we build a mass movement for this transformation. And finally, also to Boss's point, to the financial sector, because for this transformation, next to the supply chain incentives, we also need the financial incentives. Thanks.
Dan, so, oh my gosh, 30 seconds. Amazing. Well done. I think that link to the financial sector is so important. So I'm so glad we have Baz with us today as well to talk about that element of it. Bruno, let's come to you now for your 1 minute on how P4G is really going to help you scale the solution.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, it's great to see from what other countries have been able to do, such as the initiatives in the UK, that clearly show that curbing food loss and waste will circumvent economic losses, and that there's a real business opportunity for both the private as well as the public sector. So the food loss and waste voluntary agreement is one of the efforts in South Africa to help this transition to achieve the healthy, sustainable food systems. And the Consumer Goods Council South Africa considers the prevention and reduction of food loss and waste also critical to the companies. So I personally strongly believe that the solution lies in circularity. So we've talked about the downstream activities such as channeling this safe food to charities to answer the hunger levels faced at household level. And as Nestlé, we're also actively looking into more upstream solutions in circularity. So just a couple of small examples: chicken manure to regenerate soil quality, or using the spent coffee grounds to grow mushrooms, or black wattle, which is a pest, to mix it into cow feed to reduce methane emissions, etc. So I think this is where we will learn from others and share our best practices as well. And so with the P4G funding, the Consumer Goods Council will be looking to activate financial investment programs, such as carbon credits, to incentivize and recognize those who do good in the prevention and reduction of food loss.
Bruno, thank you so much. those examples are just fantastic. It's really nice to see those kind of very specific on the ground examples of projects that are really happening. Baz, we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you could maybe come back in and just give your kind of 1 minute thought on how the P4G network could help scale the solutions that you talked about earlier on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, and excellent opportunity. I think, to be honest, it's all about cooperation. And when we talk to the supply chains and each player in it, I think to a significant degree, the starting point usually is and should be the food companies who actually increasingly cooperate to safeguard that they have the right supply chain in place, and then also take responsibility, but also the opportunity to prove that they're doing the right thing on these topics and get rewarded by their consumers. And in order to play that role efficiently, I think and I hope that supply chains become ever tighter so that there's more information, there's more quality, and there's more investment possible to reduce food loss and waste. And of course, as a financial institution active throughout the supply chain in food and agriculture, we'd love to make those connections, and we'd also love to make sure that that change is financed, because it all starts with incentives to do the right thing. And I think currently, up until now, the incentives very often are to do the wrong thing. And if we can prove with the examples given today as well, that scaling up solutions actually is both good for society as a whole, but also for the individual players in it, we will actually be able to make change at scale rapidly.
Thank you so much, Baz. That's such an excellent point to close out that panel discussion on, that, you know, incentivizing those good things at the systemic, but also the business and the individual level. Thank you. I'm delighted to hand over now to Commissioner Biene for our closing remarks. Commissioner Biene is the Commissioner for the Ethiopia Environment, Forest and Climate Change Commission. Thank you so much for being with us, and please take the floor for the closing remarks.
Thank you for inviting me to give a closing remark on this important P4G thematic breakout session on food and agriculture. It's really interesting to listen to inspiring and innovative business models aimed at building resilience across the food value chain, from improving smallholder farmer livelihoods to reducing food loss and waste from farm to retail. I'm pretty much impressed to see how P4G, through this partnership, brings strong private sector and investor engagement in solutions that make P4G unique, is very valuable for countries like Ethiopia to learn from, leverage and attract jobs and investment into national agendas for developing countries. One of the most important takeaways from this breakout session is that market-based solutions are a silver bullet to deliver climate action at speed and scale, particularly for bringing the food and agriculture value chain together. The experience we have heard from the flawless partnership is worth mentioning in this regard. The ongoing innovative interventions in 3 countries to reduce food loss and waste through government providing targets and corporation committing to ambitious voluntary agreements that in turn help to generate market with emerging business models to monetize the savings from reducing food loss are really fascinating. We need to focus on scaling up such type of partnerships across the most vulnerable countries in the years to come. As far as Ethiopia is concerned, the P4G partnerships interventions are well aligned with our ambition of building a green and resilient economy by 2030. As such, it is helping the country to advance our economic priorities and make progress on our climate commitments. Our national priority of ensuring food security obviously also complements P4G's innovative approach to the food and agriculture chain. We strongly believe that P4G's unique position of bringing on board private sector stakeholders and hands-on experience and engagement of leading global networks will bolster the transformative impacts of Ethiopia's partnerships. For instance, P4G's Agroforestry for Peace, People and Prosperity partnership is expected to increase sustainable coffee production for premium markets while improving farmers' livelihoods and restoring the forest ecosystem in Ethiopia. Through the innovative deployment of renewable energy and sustainable farming practices, the partnership aims at increasing coffee yields by 10 times within 5 years. Similarly, P4G's Sustainable Food Partnership being implemented in Ethiopia is also expected to enhance food security and improve livelihoods for smallholder farmers through producing nutritious and affordable biscuits with locally sourced ingredients. The partnership is building a collaborative and replicable model that includes global leaders in food production and Ethiopian biscuit manufacturers and farmers. It's my strong belief that this year's P4G Summit helps us to showcase the positive impacts that P4G has been making in terms of realizing various sustainable development goals, particularly in the least developed countries such as Ethiopia. It will be important to leverage important international events, including the UN Food System Summit and UNFCCC COP26, to showcase the unique nature of P4G's impact model of delivery and implementation of commitments. We look forward to working closely with the existing partnerships and welcome new partnerships to invest in Ethiopia. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner BNA, for those wonderful closing remarks. I think you've really hit the nail on the head there. The collaboration between public and private, and the scale of investment that is required is wonderful. Thank you so much to our keynote speakers, to our panelists, for your participation, for your remarks, inspirational, and it's just so wonderful to hear about all of the work that is actually happening on the ground right now. I think it really reflects the nature of P4G, that these projects are about doing things, about changing things, and then about scaling that change. This is really the beginning of a journey through this global alliance of doers. And on behalf of P4G, we look forward to co-creating and co-investing with you in the future. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found this as informative and inspirational as we did, or as I did. And Ms. Clyde, I'm handing it back to you now to guide us through the next discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Claire Neller and all the distinguished speakers for your remarks, for sharing innovative solutions to reduce food loss and waste and improve the livelihood of smallholders. Moving forward, we'll open the P4G panel discussion session where our panelists will deliberate on the two agendas, which are establishing sustainable food systems responding to climate change and partnerships using innovative technology to go net zero in food and agriculture. And now, I would like to invite the moderator of the P4G panel discussion session, Ambassador Hyun Jenny Kim, Deputy Director General of Global Green Growth Institute.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to be a part of this discussion on resilient and sustainable agriculture and food systems, one of the key themes of the P4G Seoul Summit. Agriculture and food systems are facing significant challenges posed by a multitude of factors, including climate change, extreme weather events, and natural disasters, along with the COVID-19 pandemic. Small-scale family farms, rural women and youth, and vulnerable people in developing countries suffer from nutritional imbalances, food insecurity, or economic difficulties that constitute a threat to their livelihoods. In 2015, the international community has adopted 17 ambitious goals to achieve sustainable development by 2030, leaving no one behind. In order to achieve SDG number 2, zero hunger, we need to ensure long-term food security. This requires many actions. We should provide adequate quality and quantity of food to all, including vulnerable people, improve nutrition, enhance productivity and profitability of farmers. Also, we should shift towards sustainable agriculture and food systems by adopting and scaling up climate-friendly and resilient production and supply practices. The world is projected to hold nearly 10 billion people by 2050, yet today, hundreds of millions of people remain hungry. Agriculture uses almost half of the world's vegetated land, and food production generates 1/4 of global greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, more than 1 billion tons of food is lost or wasted every year, while diets in many parts of the world are driving demand for more resource-intensive foods. In this context, the following discussion will first focus on establishing sustainable food systems responding to climate change. And then we will discuss the second topic, partnerships using innovative technology to go net zero in food and agriculture. So, let me introduce our distinguished panelists here with us today. We have Mr. Bruce Campbell, Director of Research Program on Climate Change, Agriculture, and Food Security, CGIAR. CGIAR is a global partnership that unites organizations engaged in research for a food-secure future. CGIAR is dedicated to reducing rural poverty, increasing food security, improving human health and nutrition, and ensuring more sustainable management of natural resources. Mr. Sean DeClan, Head of Food System Initiative, World Economic Forum, WEF. Ms. Brigitte Kvist Sorensen, Secretary General, Dan Church Aid from Denmark. Dan Church Aid is an NGO to support the poorest people of the world. It provides emergency relief in disaster-stricken areas and long-term development assistance in poor regions to create a more equitable and sustainable world. Next, Mr. Klaus Kunz, Head of Sustainability and Business Stewardship, Bayer Crop Science. Bayer Crop Science is a global company leading research capabilities in biotechnology, crop protection, and data science to deliver tailored solutions to farmers. Ms. Catherine Bertini, Chair of Board of Directors, GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. GAIN is a foundation to tackle the human sufferings caused by malnutrition, working with governments, businesses, and civil society. GAIN aims to transform food systems so that it delivers more nutritious foods for all people, especially the most vulnerable. So welcome everyone. We have a panel to deliver diverse views and perspectives representing private sector, civil society, and international organizations. Let me move to the agenda number 1, establishing sustainable food system, responding to climate change. My first question goes to all panelists. Given the pronounced impact of COVID-19 pandemic and climate change on agriculture and food system, a holistic approach is required to establish sustainable food system both domestically and globally. Governments, farmers, private sector entities, all actors should play its part. International organizations, NGOs, civil society, and academia can provide great advisory services and support in decision-making implementation, and capacity development. Therefore, please share what your organization's efforts are to build a sustainable food system responding to climate change. And what are the biggest challenges in your perspective in transitioning into sustainable agriculture? Please share your intervention within 3 minutes. I would like to invite Mr. Bruce Campbell first. So Bruce, go over to you.
Thanks very much. So I lead the climate change program of the International Research Centers, but I hope in my remarks today it will indicate this is really research with a difference. We work closely with farmers, policymakers, so right at the farm level and the national level, but also at the global level with the climate change negotiators, for example. We focus on what are the climate risks and what needs to be done. And it's very context specific. What has needed in Vietnam is very different from what's needed by farmers in Kenya. And within Kenya even, there's very different solutions. And then we also focus on reducing greenhouse gases from agriculture. Our ultimate aim is to get climate smart agriculture into the farmers' hands and getting climate informed advisories. So these are seasonal advisories, daily advisories about the weather so that farmers can make decisions as to what they need to do. I can give you an example. We have something called Climate Smart Agricultural Villages. There's tens of thousands of them now across around 20 countries where we try and bring technologies, services, policies all together to change the lives of the farmers. To take another example, in Vietnam, we work with the ministry on a salinity warning system. So this is what's going to happen if this particular year there's going to be salinity intrusion in the country. So they now have a forecasting system. Within 3 years, there's 1 million hectares now being covered. 500,000 farmers are changing their planting times in relation to the forecasting system. And our results show that there's a 20% increase in incomes for the farmers. So this research is research together with people on the ground, understanding what the problems are and trying to make a difference. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Bruce, for sharing your organization's activities, particularly in developing countries. Let me move to Sean from WEF. So Sean, over to you, please.
I think I'd like to make 3 observations in this respect. And as you said, I mean, this is building on the context of us working through the challenges of COVID. I think the first observation is that there are indeed a large number of structural risks that we have to look at, not individually, but systemically. And that this is going to require not just governments working on their own or the private sector working on its own or civil society working on its own, but a fully integrated multi-stakeholder response if we're going to achieve the scale and the systems change that is needed. And so I think that would be to manage these interconnected risks. The second observation I think that we would make is that in adopting an integrated response to things like food systems transformation, it will require the building out of quite dynamic multi-stakeholder platforms that really can look at both, as Bruce was just saying, the global level agenda and also what is needed at a national or local level. And so we have 2 good examples of that is operating. One is in Asia itself, where the example of Grow Asia is a dynamic example of this kind of multi-stakeholder approach in action, where they're working across 6 countries and more than 100 value chain partnerships that all can be then mobilized both to support what is needed to happen in the respective countries, whether that's in quite sophisticated market economies like Indonesia and the Philippines, or ones that are just emerging like Cambodia. And but also how you build across those initiatives to create cross-cutting agendas, say in terms of building out digital solutions platforms for the region. I think another good example is the Tropical Forest Alliance, which is a global platform that engages hundreds of actors across business, finance, civil society and government, looking at 4 major value chains that will impact on positively or negatively on tropical forests, and in over 20 jurisdictions that drive deforestation, and so how we take that out of the supply chain. But what we're seeing is this requires this win-win strategy to bring all these different sectors together to really look at how they can make that change happen, to promote a production and protection model at scale. I think the third and final observation that we would make from our side is we're entering into a period where innovation is going to be critical. Not just innovation in the classic technology sense of that, even though that's important. Our research has shown that in the food and agriculture sector, there's at the same time as when the health sector had $145 billion invested into it with 18,000 startups, the food and agriculture sector had 14 billion, so 1/10 of that, with maybe just 1,000 startups. And so what we're seeing is this huge opportunity for innovation, but thinking of that innovation not just in the digital or data sense, but looking at innovation around knowledge, around bringing in local knowledge, around institutional innovation, social innovation, and also the sorts of innovations that's going to be required in building out an ecosystem approach, particularly at a country and regional level. How do you support building out ecosystems that will drive this innovation, that will allow us to take this systemic cross-silo view to change? So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Sean, for sharing your observations. Yes, as you mentioned, we are facing both challenges and opportunities. Let me invite Brigitte as next speaker. So Brigitte, are you ready? Can you share your views?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, as you mentioned, Danchurch-8 is actually almost next year we will celebrate our 100-year history of fighting poverty and injustice, as it says in our statutes. And so much has changed since, of course, and I think the whole issue of food and food security takes up more and more of the work we do. We have a global goal of building resilient communities, and the sustainable food systems is really the driver, the pivotal of that work. But truly sustainable food systems have multiple purposes. It is about getting adequate food, it's about nutrition, it's about livelihoods, it's about environmental protection, but it's also about rights, human rights, land rights. It's also about financial inclusion. So as we heard from the 2 previous speakers, it is, you have to take a holistic approach to this. And what we do and have started on more and more is to have these multi-stakeholder partnerships where we invite and coordinate, we sort of connect the dots, as we call it, our local partners, the farmers, who knows a lot. Maybe in the older days, we used to bring stuff to poor farmers, but this is not the way it works now. It's actually the local farmers are very much in the process of we use their knowledge, and then we link up with the private sector to provide technology. And so we make a full, a full value chain that I think is so important when we're looking at food systems, that we have the full value chain, we have the local partners, we have the farmers, we have private sector, we have civil society, Our role is very much to do advocacy and also to promote rights and human rights. But then private sector has an added value of providing technology. Private sector is notoriously better than INGOs to do scale. We have learned so much from the private sector on that. But I also think the whole issue of financial inclusion, what we see again is that we can have very good projects that also could be scaled, but actually what is lacking is access to finance. So that is a component that we have added in the recent years because it's so important. So back to the challenge, I think the post-COVID, it for some might be post, but for most it's very much a reality. The COVID situation has been the serious lockdowns. And if we talk about food production, food systems, the lockdowns have really made life very difficult for many people. So that is a challenge that we're still living under. But I think actually climate change is our biggest challenge. For every trip I take to sub-Saharan Africa, things we thought worked, agricultural production that was resilient and so forth, is we kind of have to learn why we run, and this is why this has to be a multi-stakeholder partnership, because it's the climate change that is really speeding up or accelerating the need to do something, and do something quite fast and in very good partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigitte. Thank you for sharing your organization's efforts, particularly to promote holistic approach, multi-stakeholders partnership, and ensuring sustainable whole value chain of food systems. Thank you. And let me invite Klaus. Klaus, you are representing the private sector, so please share your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jenny. And first of all, a big thanks that I have the opportunity to speak at the P4G conference. It's really a great honor and a big pleasure for me. When Bayer started in 2018 to transition into a different era after the acquisition of Monsanto, we put some really significant changes on our overall business strategy. And one of the most remarkable ones was to put sustainability a bit out of the corner of the public relations topic, straight at the core of business. And that comes with a clear implication, because we were thinking it's the only way, if you really want to get important changes to scale, you need to link them to the business. So looking at the crop science division, we were wondering what are the most urgent areas where change is needed. And it is actually apparently very clear. The big question is, how can we continue to feed a growing world population without starving the planet? And I think it's very important to take both aspects into account. And looking at from this angle, we said that we need to help growing more food, but also where food is most needed. So from that angle, we put out a commitment to support and empower 100 million smallholder farmers in the next 10 years in low and middle income countries with the highest priority. On the preservation side, preserving biodiversity and fighting climate change, we also put out, I think, two quite significant commitments, which are to reduce the environmental impact of crop protection and also the emissions of greenhouse gases on the fields of our customers by 30% both in the next 10 years. And now that those commitments are done, it's the easy part. Now the implementation is the really exciting part, because now I would say the challenges also turn into the opportunities. So I talk about challenges and opportunities at the same time. We need to transform those sustainability directions into business models for farmers, because otherwise they will not be adopted. And for example, if you talk about climate resilient systems, we need to offer farmers opportunities, tools, solutions to go into climate smart agriculture with an increased benefit and profitability. And the other one, which I think is also tremendously important, if you look into what are those challenges and opportunities from a COVID perspective, we have seen where the food system has gaps now in the lockdown phase. I think it makes it very clear where we can take action first, because we talk even more about resilience than about sustainability today. But I think that's also more an opportunity where we can take the right learnings for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Catherine. Catherine, can you share your views?
Certainly, Jenny, and thank you very much for including me. Representing GAIN, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, is always exciting, actually, because of the work that GAIN does in terms of working to provide access to adequate nutrition and nutritious food that's safe for everyone, that people can have access and that the food is safe. And safe for us means not only safe to consume, but also safe to create. And that means that we do have automatic connections with different other organizations where we work together on issues of the environment. So GAIN is the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition. That means we don't suggest that we're fixing everything ourselves, but that we are working with other partners, as is everyone else on this panel. So when we think specifically about the environment, we've been working with partners like the EAT Forum and the Biodiversity Alliance and the World Wildlife Fund, the Food and Land Use Coalition, and others. And just this month, together with a couple of those groups, we actually have organized the Innovative Food Systems portal off of our website, where we are trying to encourage people to give recommendations for solutions for collective action in terms of being able to grow nutritious food, but also do it in a way that's not harmful to the environment. So our view is that if we can work as an alliance to collect a lot of information from others, that would be useful. And others means everybody: entrepreneurs, food producers, processors, researchers, retail people, policymakers, anyone in the chain who can have something to say about how it is that this could be best accomplished. Now, moving just to, well, staying in my 3 minutes, but moving to two other points. One is that the UN Food Systems Summit, of course, has a whole section on environmental related issues and climate change issues. And so that's another opportunity, I think, for people to, in fact, a key opportunity for people to input into many of these issues in a way that hopefully the global community will be paying attention to very soon in their July meetings in Rome, and then the September summit in New York, or virtually. And then the final point is to piggyback on something that Sean had said about working in the environment and using local connections and knowledge. There's one population that knows more about what's going on locally in the environment than anyone else, and I would submit that those are in the developing world are rural girls. The rural girls in the global south carry a big burden in their homes, and part of that burden is to find firewood and water in many, many cases. So more than anybody else, I think, in the community, these girls know what the status is of the water and the creeks and rivers and lakes in their community, what the status is of the places where they might be able to find firewood, and therefore of the forests and the trees. So they seem to be a very untapped resource. More and more of them are going to school, more and more of them are educated, but they would be a potentially wonderful source of important information about the environment that helps support our overall global needs, if only we reached out to that population and listened to them and helped give them some background about how best to input their very useful information that is unique. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you particularly for sharing your thoughts regarding the role of rural girls, who has a huge potential for the development in the agriculture sector, particularly in developing countries. All of you emphasize the role of public-private partnership. Therefore, let me ask a little bit more specific question regarding public-private partnership, especially at local level. So my next question goes to Klaus. Klaus, from private sector's perspective, what do you think is the biggest challenge in transitioning into climate resilient agriculture in developing countries? Over to you, Klaus.
Thank you, Jenny. I think that climate is really prioritized on our agendas in our industry. We will need, of course, find systems which work for smallholder farmers. So we cannot simply transfer what is developed as climate-smart agriculture in the broad acres, in the big fields in the Americas, simply to India. But I think there are tremendous opportunities. I would even start with the yields again. If farmers will be able to produce a lot more on the same area, for me, it's a very important contribution because it avoids transformation of more land into agriculture. This is something which really needs to be avoided. And that's why I believe sustainable intensification is necessary. But as Sean said, we will find ways to also incentivize farmers in Asia, for example, for climate smart practices and generating additional value income streams for them for climate smart practices could be by generating carbon credits through carbon sequestration, could be maybe by insetting if the food value chain will incentivize and pay a higher price for food which is produced at low carbon emissions. So I think there's many opportunities, but it's absolutely important that it's tailored to the conditions and the opportunities in the countries. And therefore, we will need to do this in a lot of partnerships as well. And also, of course, governance will come into play. But everybody should start on his own and not wait for others to take the lead. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. My final question goes to Brigitte. Brigitte, I would like to hear your view about local farmers' role in building sustainable food system and improving nutrition. Because many panelists, they touched upon the roles of local farmers. So what is your organization's strategy to effectively engage local farmers, particularly in vulnerable countries, to enhance their role and ownership in food security and nutrition improvement efforts? So over to you.
Thank you. The short answer, I think, is to make it worth their while. Farmers have been traditionally growing in a particular way, and they're very concerned if you start to introduce new crops, what will happen if the harvest fails? We don't know this crop. We have tested quinoa in Ethiopia, and it's been a long journey, but this is just an example, to talk to the farmers and work together with them and with our local partners in growing this crop. And then to make sure both that they would eat it. I mean, we all know that we have our favorite foods, and we all know some of us might not like quinoa. So there's a lot of work in how can you work with foods that are new and make sure that it's actually used, but also how could you work with it as a cash crop? And normally a cash crop is then sent to the local market or shipped to, in this instance, to Europe to be processed. So we would like to give the farmers an opportunity to sell their crop, but sell it in the country where they actually live. That instead of having this idea that we have to export everything out of the countries that we work in, what could we do in country? And we knew that there was a demand for healthy biscuits. It was actually together with GAIN at the beginning, and it was also, since we're sitting here, initially funded and still funded by P4G, that there was a need for a healthy biscuit. And then we ended up with two Danish international companies, Arla Food Ingredients, which works with whey, and Novozymes, which works in biological solutions. And then we thought, okay, if we're going to make this biscuit, it has to be affordable. So that was a huge issue, particularly for private sector, that they had to help produce a very cheap biscuit, but also it should be produced in Ethiopia and preferably by bakers that were women-led. And the market was there. There is a demand for that. And there is, by the way, also about 1 million refugees in Ethiopia. And right now, protein biscuits is being sourced from Dubai. So we were looking at the whole value chain. But initially, it started with the local farmers convincing them with what they normally do and what they would like to do, that we have to look at different types of crops and how can that make those crops assure them an income, but also assure that they get something to eat. So I think that the starting point is to get the farmers on board and also understand the risk that these farmers, poor farmers, are taking by start cultivating new crops. It is a huge challenge for them because they know what they have, they don't know what they're getting. So you kind of have to present the whole value chain, and then you get the buy-in. And right now, the protein biscuits are being produced in Ethiopia. So we're very happy about that project. That was just an example. We have others.
Thank you very much for sharing your success stories and also lessons learned. So finally, I would like to invite you to make 1-minute remarks. What is, in your opinion, the most urgent action or the most important barrier in building sustainable food systems, particularly under the COVID-19 pandemic? Because all of you mentioned the significant impact of COVID-19 on food system and agriculture. Therefore, what is the most urgent action or most important barrier to be overcome? So can I invite maybe Bruce first? Bruce, over to you. Just 1 minute, please.
I'll be very short. For me, so my focus is small-scale producers. And I think ultimately the biggest challenge is getting small-scale producers into markets that really work for them. So getting the credit they need, getting very tailored information for small areas of land, getting good prices for their produce. I think if we can really change the face of small-scale production, then that will build security and livelihoods for small farmers. Of course, we have to add in making sure they're resilient and as green as possible, the value chains. So it's a massive role for the private sector. And therefore, I really like the target I heard of. I think it was 100 million smallholder farmers by a certain day. There's 500 million in the year in the globe. That has to be our ultimate target. Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Bruce. I'm sorry. And next, Sean, over to you.
In many ways, I would echo what Bruce has just said, in the sense that I think supporting smallholder farmers through what will be a quite challenging food systems transition, but so important for the world, is going to be absolutely critical, and providing them the tools that they need and the incentives that they need to make that transition possible is such a key agenda for us as a globe if we're going to really create the food systems that are healthy and sustainable for the future. And the other piece of that, I think, is the role that we need to put on innovation. I can just not stress this enough, that it's going to require innovations in policy, in the way that we work across silos. It's going to require a lot of rethinking of innovation in terms of how we use digital and data technology around local knowledge systems. And so how do we build up those local innovation ecosystems in a way that allow local communities to really harness this innovation, to be able to leapfrog and to make the jumps that are required so that we can really sustainably change food systems.
Thank you, Sean, for sharing your emphasis on innovation. Actually, at next agenda, we are going to discuss further about the role of innovation and technology. Let me invite Bridget. Can you share your view?
Yes, thank you. And I won't repeat what the previous speakers have said. I agree, but I would like to go back to food loss. 1/3 of all food produced in the world is lost. And there, we really have to think about what to do. In developing countries, it's lost in the field and the way to the market. There is no way of storing, a lack of storage facilities, lack of cold chain, so you lose the food. And in the richer part of the world, in my country, it's in the retail, the supermarkets, and it's the producers at home. So we need to be much more focused on the fact that 1/3 of all food produced is actually being lost. There's a huge gain and a huge win. So, and thank you, Catherine, also for bringing it up. In Denmark, we have made something we call We Food stores. It's not for free, it's to buy. It is food that would otherwise be thrown out. There's nothing wrong with it. Maybe the tin is a bit bumped, or maybe the flour will, you can only keep it for 3 days. So what people do is they go into these stores, and this is about food waste. It's not about poverty, it's about food waste. So people go in and buy for cheap prices because they want to do something about food waste, see what they can get, and then they move on to the supermarket. And I think that whole way of thinking about food loss, and then we have a whole storyline saying, okay, there's actually a lot of people in the world who don't have enough food. So it's also about making a movement, but really the small-scale farmers need predictable and good value chains in order to get an income and in order to produce food that is not lost in the fields.
Thank you, Bridget, particularly sharing your experience to reduce food waste, which is a very, very important issue. Catherine, finally.
Thank you. I want to talk about something totally different. Well, almost totally different. It starts with nutrition, and the fact that I don't think that we collectively yet understand the importance of nutrition in people's diets and in their health. And I'm hopeful that the COVID crisis, that one of the few silver linings that we might see from it, could be that people see that so many of the people who got ill had some sort of underlying condition, many of which were because they didn't have the right kinds of food to eat over their lifetimes. And that's whether they come from rich countries or poor countries. But the importance of adequate nutrition, I hope we can use this as a teachable moment about why it's important to eat the right kinds of food for one's whole life. That having been said, the second issue that I think is critically important to this question is that we don't have a real focus from almost any of our governments on nutrition. And instead, we have health ministries and agriculture ministries who kind of do their own thing and might or might not think about nutrition. They might think about it if they're thinking about food, but they don't think about it if they're thinking about health or medicine necessarily. They don't think about it if they're thinking about what crops to grow or whether to fortify them or how to prepare them for the market. And this is a global issue. I often think that the agriculture people and the health people both think, when they're made to think about nutrition, they say, oh yeah, that's in our portfolio. But they don't do anything about it, either of them. So individually we have to pay attention to nutrition, but collectively our governments have to find a better way to send the messages, not only to their publics, but also to themselves about what the governments need to do to be promoting nutrition issues in their own ecosystems. Thank you.
Thank you for emphasizing nutrition issues. So, and then finally, I would like to invite Klaus. Klaus, please share your view.
I take the farmer's perspective, and not only the smallholder farmers, all farmers in the world. I think it's where COVID and climate change connects, is that it creates unprecedented events to the farmers. Could be weather events, could be lack of workforce, could be a disruption of the supply chain and the markets. This is, I think, where we need to help the farmers. The farmers are Wherever you look, not only in the low-income countries, farmers have not a lot of room to maneuver in terms of profitability. So I think it's a matter of innovation and support that we help them to overcome any of those crises. And I think COVID is now 1 or 2 years, but climate change is increasing. It's on the rise, and you can see it. At least in our geographies, you can really see it every summer that it's changing the opportunities, and it's putting massive challenges on the farmers.
Thank you, Klaus. Thank you very much, all panelists, for sharing your wonderful experiences, lessons learned, and inspiring stories. Now we conclude our discussion on the first agenda. Before we move to the second agenda, we have a story of a Korean startup which is striving to achieve carbon neutrality. So here is Ms. Min Keum-chae, CEO of 지구인 Company.
안녕하세요. 저는 지구인 컴퍼니의 민금채입니다. 지구인 컴퍼니는 2017년 7월에 환경 기여를 할 수 있는 식품을 개발하고 유통하기 위해 설립했습니다. 현재 곡물과 콩류로 식물성 고기를 개발하고 제조하고 있습니다. 언니미트, 슬라이스, 민스, 패티, 풀드 바비큐 4가지 제품을 상용화했고 국내뿐만이 아니라 중국, 베트남, 미국 등에 수출하고 있습니다. 글로벌 시장에서 팬시한 K푸드 대체육으로 자리매김하고 있습니다. 처음에는 지구인 컴퍼니 설립 후에 못생긴 과일과 채소를 계약 구매해서 30에서 50% 정도 저렴하게 판매했습니다. 그러던 중 3년 전에 곡물 재고가 많다는 걸 알게 됐습니다. 자연스럽게 곡물로 혁신적인 기술을 접목해서 건강하고 맛있는 음식을 만들기 위한 고민을 하게 되었고 그 즈음에 미국에서 임파서블 버거를 먹어보게 됐어요. 곡물을 가지고 만들었는데 이 정도의 맛을 구현할 수 있다면 이런 식물성 고기를 더 맛있게 개발을 하고 싶다라는 생각 때문에 개발을 시작하게 되었습니다. 지구인 컴퍼니는 2020년 9월에 지구인 팩토리를 완공했습니다. 국내에서 클린미트를 생산할 수 있는 의미 있는 공장인데요. 아직은 규모가 작고 시스템을 완비하지 못했지만 저희는 2030년까지 탄소 저감을 위해 5가지를 실천하기 위한 노력을 할 것입니다. 첫 번째는 국내산 농산물 재고를 사용함으로써 탄소 발자국을 줄일 것입니다. 두 번째는 플라스틱 대신 100% 친환경 패키지를 사용할 것입니다. 세 번째는 물과 전기 사용의 에너지 효율화를 통해서 제품 생산할 때 발생하는 탄소 배출량을 줄일 것입니다. 네 번째는 물류 차량을 전기 차량으로 변경해서 탄소 발자국을 줄일 것입니다. 마지막으로 5번째는 지속적인 탄소 저감 캠페인을 다양한 방식으로 실천할 것입니다. 30년 된 소나무가 1년간 흡수하는 탄소 흡수량이 8.6kg입니다. 식물성 고기인 언니미트 230g짜리를 한 팩을 먹으면 30년 된 소나무 1.8kg가 연간 탄소를 흡수하는 양과 같은 탄소 저감 효과를 낼 수 있습니다. 하루 한 끼 언니미트를 즐기는 것만으로도 지구의 건강을 지킬 수 있는 셈입니다. 현재 경기도 평택에 지구인 팩토리 제2공장을 설립하고 있습니다. 물과 전기 사용량을 20에서 50% 줄일 수 있는 설비를 도입하고 탄소 저감을 실시간으로 모니터링할 수 있는 시스템을 순차적으로 갖추기 위한 스마트 팩토리를 준비하고 있습니다. 탄소 중립이 가능할 수 있는 식물성 고기 클린미트 공장을 2030년까지 실현해 나갈 계획입니다.
Thank you. It was an inspiring story. Thanks for sharing the video. Now, we will move to discuss about the role of technology in sustainable agriculture and food system. There is a widespread perception that using innovative technology to achieve net zero in food and agriculture is only possible in developed countries and not relevant for developing poor countries. Do you think this is true or not? Please explain why you think so. If you can provide any examples to support your view, that will be very useful. So let me invite Catherine first. Catherine, are you ready? Over to you.
Sure. I'd like to give an example of a kind of approach that works in Africa that certainly could be replicated not only other places there, but elsewhere. And innovative technologies is maybe even a more aggressive word that I'm using. These are basic technologies. But I think my answer is going to be that farmers are interested in learning new techniques to help make them more productive and help them earn more money, and that whether they're cutting edge or whether or not there's basic technologies that farmers have not had access to before, it almost doesn't matter if they have access and training and find that these are things that they could use. So the example I'd like to share is with AGRA, the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, which is currently led by Agnes Kilobato, who also happens to chair the UN Systems Summit. This was started, as you know, by Kofi Annan with funding from Gates and Rockefeller Foundations in 2006, 7 maybe. So one of the ways in which they work is that they work with different organizations, not just governments, not just private sector, not just NGOs, but with any different kind of organization. And I think that we should look at more organizations like AGRA, like GAIN, that actually don't have to only work with governments or only work with NGOs, but can actually mix it up, because I think there's a lot of pluses. So here's the example. Poor farmers get together in small cooperatives, informal cooperatives, and decide what they want to grow on their land. They help each other with these kind of decisions, and they have the advice of an agribusiness dealer. Now, that agribusiness dealer that they choose from the people in their area has to be one who's been trained by an NGO that has been hired by AGRA in order to train the agro dealer. So they become mini extension agents, really, in terms of helping the farmers to figure out what they need, and then what kind of seed they need, and tools and implements and so forth. So once they know what they need in order to produce what they want to produce, they put a dollar figure on there, a monetary figure on that. But then the issue becomes, how can they afford it? Well, AGRA has found EFAD and other organizations to go to the banks that were reluctant to lend to the farmers and guarantee the loans to smallholder farmers. So the system would then work that a trained agro dealer who vouches for a farmer then allows that farmer to get a loan from the bank. The farmer doesn't get the cash. The farmer draws down the seeds or draws down the tools, and then the agro dealer goes back to the bank to get the reimbursement. It's been very productive. It's been a good system. It's not really high tech, but it's giving farmers access to available resources that they never had access to before. So I think whether it's innovative, whether it's high tech, or whether it's just basic services that poor people can't get, that it will be hugely beneficial to the agriculture community in the long term. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing your stories, which is really encouraging. Let me invite Brigitte next.
Yes, I mean, technology is used now and has been for a long time. So I think the important part is that it's not only technology transfer. I think we've been talking about it many times today. It's about developing technology that suits the people that they are going to help. So we can bring in a fancy new app for something, but then we realize that this app can't really be used in the context where we're working. So, or we think we've invented one good weather app or whatever app, and then it can only be used in a certain part of the world and not in the other part. So I think technology, and that is the beauty of technology, is that it is possible to develop the technology maybe not on site, but certainly in the context where it's going to be used. So I don't see any limitations on technology. Where I think the limitations is the financing of the technology. I think the technology, we have so many well-educated young people around the globe, also in the countries where we work, and I always say innovation doesn't really happen in Denmark these days. It happens in sub-Saharan Africa, because you have a lot of well-educated young people who really need a job, so they're very inventive and very innovative. It's not coming from the north. But the financial part of it is actually, if there's a barrier, I think it's on finance. And then you can also use technology. We've been testing together with another company a way of surveilling a farmer's land, so you can't go into a bank or a credit union, and actually by using that you can get credit, because that bank can see where is the land, what's the crop, what's the yield, and that actually takes the NGO completely out of the equation, which would be good, because we shouldn't be donating money to that kind. So I think financial technology that can help financial access for the smallholder farmers is really important. But the other technology, I think, is being developed. It's being developed all the time, and I think that's just positive.
Thank you very much, Brigitte, particularly for touching upon the importance of finance. So next, let me invite Sean. Sean, you may have views regarding the nexus of technology and finance, as Brigitte just emphasized.
Yes, no, very much. I mean, I think what we're seeing around this nexus of technology and finance is shifting from looking at this from a one-way system, so where this was pushing services down the chain to smallholder farmers, or pushing information down the chain, to actually looking at what is the two-way relationship around that, and how do you actually build that out. So what we're seeing is different examples. I mean, a very good one is AgriFin in East Africa, that is actually being led on by Mercy Corps, which brings a range of different public-private partners together to look at, and in that case, they're working with large numbers of farmers. So we're talking 8 million plus farmers, to really look at and understand the needs of those farmers. And particularly at times like this during COVID, where at the same time in places like Kenya, you had a locust infestation that was quite critical last year. You were getting floods, extreme floods coming in. So you're getting this, this sort of cross impact. And so then starting to use tools that then support and understand the needs of the farmers during this time, but also enhance their ability to make risk assessment at the farm level. So using that nexus between technology and finance to de-risk for the farmer, to maybe bring in innovative insurance products, to use different ways of assessing their credit, to maybe build a digital, you could say a digital passport, or for the farmers, so that they are more in control of the information, and then requesting that. And we've seen that these sorts of trusted digital channels being taken to scale in places like Ethiopia and Kenya and Nigeria in this case. And but I think what's important there, though, is that this is being done in conjunction, not just as a silver bullet. The digital piece on its own is not the silver bullet here. It is the fact that you're combining this with weekly TV programming and call center support, and helping farmers to understand better, and answer the questions, in terms of them being able to assess that information, and to be able to take an informed and integrated response. And so it comes back to this point about really seeing this as a two-way transfer of information and support and needs, and that. And that's really at the hub of this nexus, as you said, between finance and technology and local innovation.
Thank you very much, Sean, for sharing your thoughts. Yes, so all of you actually emphasized the role of technology, even in developing countries. However, technology only is not a silver bullet. So as we discussed in previous topic, holistic approach is really important, and every stakeholders, they must play their part. Let me ask next question, particularly regarding research. So my question goes to Bruce. Bruce, CGIAR is a global research partnership for food security and nutrition improvement. How do the research products contribute to making real low carbon transition happen in agriculture? So I'm asking the nexus between research and real change. So to materialize the change, what should be done? What are your suggestions to other stakeholders? Over to you, Bruce.
So I think, as researchers, the one things that we can do is think about the future, look at what we've currently got, make projections. So I think one of the really important parts of research is strategizing about how do we get to a 2-degree world? What do we have to do in agriculture and the food system? And I'd go back to other speakers and say that it's not only going to be on the production side, that we have to tackle production, we have to tackle consumption issues, and we have to tackle food loss and waste equally. In the research area, let's take the production side, then where are the real opportunities for making a difference? And so that's one of the tasks of our research groups. And essentially, the real key places are rice production, methane production, greenhouse gas emission production from rice is almost at the same level as the global aviation industry. So that's a big one to tackle. Livestock, and livestock numbers are growing in the global south. How do we reduce greenhouse gas emissions from livestock? And then putting carbon back in the soil is another crucial one, and reducing deforestation. So sustainable intensification, which Klaus mentioned, are crucial. So we're working on all those different areas. For example, the rice example, the initial research was done by the international research organizations and national partners looking for ways of reducing greenhouse gas emissions from it. And I think what they found is super exciting. In the livestock area, there's how do you change the feed? In Kenya, for example, they're using agroforestry products to feed to livestock, improving the health of the livestock, which actually improves the efficiency of production and reduces the greenhouse gas emissions per unit of milk production. And the agroforestry is also putting carbon back in the system as well. So there's all these kinds of examples. But then how do you make it happen in the bigger world? Let's not just write papers. We really have to work with stakeholders in those systems to make it happen, as we've indicated before, having these real multi-stakeholder, outcome-oriented partnerships. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you very much, Bruce, particularly for sharing your success stories regarding greenhouse gas emission reduction through research efforts. Let's talk a little bit about malnutrition. So, Catherine, I'd like to ask this question to you. Malnutrition should be addressed, taking into account both demand and supply sides. Food choices are influenced not only by price and availability, but also people's knowledge, community tradition, culture, and convenience. So please explain what actions your organization is taking to alleviate malnutrition both in supply and demand side, considering sustainable food production and consumption. Actually, at the previous topic discussion, you briefly touched upon the importance of malnutrition. Therefore, please elaborate what actions your organization is taking in alleviating malnutrition. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jenny. Very good question. There are several points that I'd like to raise. First of all, just to understanding GAIN programming, most of what we do is global as it relates to promoting policies and promoting best practices and going into more depth about many of these issues. So some of my points I will use to answer your question are more global. And then, of course, we do have some operations in some countries, which I will get to in a minute. So I've got 7 points on this. One is that I mentioned earlier, this innovative food systems portal, now that's been put together with several other partners, and where we hope that it will help to gather information and best practices and proposals for how we can have more collaborative efforts to work together on building better nutrition as well as the safety of the environment at the same time. The second is on understanding some of what you asked in that question, Denny, is that we realize that there has to be a consumer desire for better foods, for more nutritious foods. And so that is something that the organization looks into through survey research and through working with some academic institutions in order to better understand what consumers are looking for, and then try to help define what that means in terms of nutritious food availability, especially in the global South. 3 is that we are working with regulators and on policy matters as it relates to efforts to curtail unhealthy foods where it's possible to do that. 4 is that there is another new program with 5 other organizations called Demand Generation Alliance. And the purpose of this is to try to shift underlying consumer preferences toward healthy and sustainable diets and food. And one piece of this also is the school feeding network, because of course many millions of children are fed at school, and trying to ensure that those are healthy meals that fit these criteria are important as well. 5 is that we're relying heavily on this UN Global Food Systems Summit as a way to break down some of the silos that have come up over the years. And we certainly hope that there could be some really aggressive new creations of whether it's institutions or operations or different ways to go about ensuring that the food system is working and working properly. We're interested in all of the above. 6 is this in this global food space. There's been a lot more attention on youth lately, and I think it's really been very exciting. For instance, the summit, the vice chairs of all of its subcommittees are high school age teenagers, and there's a lot more involvement with different youth organizations, and we at GAIN are certainly promoting that and working with the group of young leaders to be able to help them to push governments and businesses and others on issues of adequate nutrition and paying attention to climate, environment, health, and so forth. So that's a welcome new program, new idea. And then finally, yes, in the countries in which we operate, we work closely with local partners, and they include governments, NGOs, other kinds of systems in each country, in order to help develop innovative programs for developing nutritious and environmentally safe food. And then as another subset of this issue of national, I understand, and especially with Birgit on the line, that the Danish National Food Systems Dialogue is one of the ones people have been talking about as a process that's coming up with a lot of good ideas based already in part on what's happening in Denmark, and that they might end up being useful as models elsewhere. And then in Korea, I mentioned food banks before, but probably the most mature food banking system in Asia is the Korean food banking system, supported by the Ministry of Social Work in Korea. but it feeds hundreds of thousands of people as a social safety net, especially seniors and children. And as I mentioned before, I think the food banks have been around for a while. At this point, especially with COVID, they're increasingly important to be able to reach people that otherwise don't have access to adequate food. And they're a great tool to be able to decrease the amount of food waste. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing your organization's actually 7 strategies. By the way, just like you, I'm also looking forward to the World Food System Summit this year. That will be a wonderful opportunity to gather global commitment on this matter. We have one recorded question from the audience. Therefore, let's listen to it first.
Hello, this is Dr. S.M. Morris, Head of Capacity Building and Development Projects Division, African, Asian Rural Development Organization, ARDO. My question to the distinguished panelists is, how could a partnership achieve net zero in food and agriculture system using innovative technologies for the vast African Asian region by enabling producers' capabilities and enhancing production capacity while mitigating the climate change effects? Thank you.
Let me invite Sean, Klaus, and Brigitte to respond to this question. So can I invite Sean first? Can you respond to this question? What do you think about this, particularly focusing on Asia and Africa?
Well, I think how we protect and restore and sustainably farm and manage our lands is probably one of the most critical questions of this century. And it's going to require a huge step change, both politically and economically and socially, in terms of how we do this, how we link farmers to consumers to make that possible. And so I think what we need to do is really have some bold targets in the short term that really start to address that. I think before Bruce was referring to this potential target of bringing 100 million farmers into supporting them around net zero transitions, and then looking at how we engage the whole 500 million. But initially, even if we could create that tipping point of 20%, that are actively brought in, that are able to draw down carbon onto their lands, that are being rewarded for that, but for other services as well, eco services around that in terms of water management and the use of agroecology and regenerative agriculture and things like that. Coming up with the partnerships and the innovations that will get us to that 100 million farmers across Asia and Africa is going to be absolutely critical. It won't just happen on its own. It's got to be really proactively managed, and there's got to be incentives put in place so that farmers can see that they can make the shift on their land that is needed for that to happen. So absolutely critical challenge. I think this is something really bold, and I'm really looking towards the UN Food System Summit and other major international platforms like the COP meeting, COP26 at the end of the year, to really address that challenge and to allow us to collectively build to that scale.
Thank you very much, Sean. Can I invite Brigitte? Can you share your views about this question?
Yes, thank you very much. I think Sean already said quite a lot. We've been talking about it already, but this of involving the local farmers, I always say that we need the last P in public-private people partnership, because it is really about not convincing, because I don't think there's any convincing going on when we are working in the field with the local partners and farmers, but to actually change the way we farm, looking at agroecology, but also looking at the biodiversity. I mean, the way that smallholder farmers have developed farming and has been pushed by exporters and so on to grow or to farm. I think we need to get back to what they used to do. They used to be very good at using fertilizers, which are not poisonous. They have a lot of techniques from before we can use again today. So I think the issue is really scale. How do we bring this to scale? Because it can't be 4 villages. It has to be 1 million farmers. It has to be 5 million farmers. But I think that there is a momentum and an understanding. And I also think that there is finance in the system to do this. I think what we need to do is to be better at not only sharing all our abundance of knowledge at these conferences, but actually do things together much more systematically, because a lot of good things are happening already. So I think it's already happening, but I think we need to be more systematic in not reinventing the wheels in the various platforms we're sitting in or what we're doing, and then it needs to go to scale. But we need to include the farmers. The farmers must be at the center of this, because they're also the ones taking, as I said before, the greatest risks in this.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Finally, Klaus, can you share your response on this question?
Yeah, maybe quickly on 2 initiatives. The first one is something which we are rolling out in Asia. And I think here the purpose is really to connect different partners who can help farmers in one central connection point, because that makes things really efficient. So physical points, we call them the Better Life Farming Centers, where we help from the buyer angle, but where we will have also other companies, for example, providing access to better irrigation systems, to fertilization systems, very important finance systems. It was mentioned several times. We call it the Better Life Farming Centers. And I think also trainings, proposing new approaches, different approaches to grow their crops. They can all find this there. And they are really, really well accepted in the countries. We have more than 500 already in India. We are building them in Indonesia. We are building them in Bangladesh and in many countries, because we have to achieve our 100 million target, and we want to. So those farming centers, like Better Life Farming Centers, I think are really a very crucial element in helping farmers from multiple angles, not only from one. And if I say training, I'd like to quickly touch on another initiative, which I'm personally really proud of. We have designed a so-called Safe Use Ambassador program, where we reach out to the agronomy faculties of the universities in Asia and in Africa, and also in Latin America. And we invite young students to work with us on how should farming be conducted, with a specific focus on stewardship and safe use. All those elements on container management, obsolete stock management, the appropriate use of crop protection. And then they go back to their villages, and sometimes they send us really interesting videos back on how they were interacting with their communities and trying to bring the new knowledge into their communities. And we had a virtual meeting last year with almost 1,000 participants, also government officials joining in, and universities directors joining in. I think that is really taking off. It's a joint effort. It's a real joint effort to come to more sustainable practices. And I think those 2 initiatives are just 2 examples where it's all about the right partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Klaus, particularly for sharing your initiative to invest into new generation, young people. So let me invite you to make 1-minute final remarks regarding rather psychological issue. So my question is, technology can solve many problems. However, if farmers, particularly local farmers in developing countries, if they do not accept those technologies, we cannot achieve the net zero goal in agriculture. So, what do you think is the most crucial action to involve local farmers in these efforts towards net zero in agriculture? Many of you already touched upon the role of local farmers. So, what action should be done to invite them as a key actor in the efforts towards net zero? Maybe Bruce, can you start first?
Yeah, sure. I think we've said it in terms of really starting working with the farmers and understanding their perspectives. I think that is the absolute crucial place to start. But then, of course, building on what they know, suggesting other things, but it's never a case of only working at the farmer level. Many people have said that already. One also then has to reach into the national policies, the governance issues, and those things. But I think it's really understanding what farmers want. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Understanding farmers, yes. And Sean, can you share your view about this?
So I think from where we see things, it's very much that, people first is going to be critical here, particularly as we look to rebuild out of COVID and how we do that. Putting farmers at the centre is going to be key, but equally looking at the role and the importance of consumers in the cities that neighbour those farms is equally important. So how do we really ensure that we're listening to people and bringing them on board right from the very beginning? So we're not designing for people in a way that is actually not beneficial, but we're actually engaging people from the outset to be designing systems that actually work for them. And that allow them to participate and engage in the fullest in something that's so important for all of us. I think having food systems that are nutritious and sustainable, and making sure that people are fed well and nourished well, and the planet is able to thrive, brings dignity to everyone. This is something that that is at the heart of what we do every day. And so seeing the importance of the people in that is absolutely critical.
Thank you. Let me invite Klaus next. Klaus, can you share your view about how to convince farmers, local farmers?
I have to say, I'm not a big fan of thinking that farmers are super conservative people, much more conservative than others. In Bayer, we organize every 2 years a Youth X Summit where we invite 50 to 100 young farmers. And I have to say, it's not that they learn from me how modern agriculture should go, but I rather learn from them. They are extremely excited. They are entrepreneurs. I have a huge trust in the next generation of farmers. They've been growing up with all the digital tools, which I didn't. So I think there's a huge potential. We need just to help them, to connect them to what they need to have. We need to give them the access which they need, and we need to very carefully listen, it was mentioned before, to their clear and specific needs in their countries. But I have a huge trust in the farmer next generation, also in the current generation, but even more in the next, that they will take it to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Klaus. I share your trust as well. Let me invite Brigitte. You already mentioned the public-private people's partnerships. So you may have good idea how to get the farmers' trust regarding technology.
But I must say, like Klaus said, I don't see the farmers as the obstacle. I think if you create incentives for farmers so they can survive, as a young man and a young woman wants to create a family and having to do farming, then they want to have a good life. They want to do better. So what I think we can do is provide some knowledge, training, finance, and so on. I think there's no need to persuade. It's about creating the real incentives. If you talk to a farmer and say, listen, you can get a good yield out of your field by not using pesticides, by actually using organic fertilizers, they will automatically use organic fertilizers. So I don't think it's an obstacle. I actually think maybe sometimes my type of organization is the obstacle for not listening to what the needs are. The needs are to make a proper livelihood and to support your family and make sure that your children gets good education. And then we have to listen into that and then provide whatever we can in that context.
Thank you very much, Birgit. And I'd like to invite Catherine. Catherine, not only technology, malnutrition issue, also farmers' actually participation is crucial. Therefore, can you share your thought about this question?
Yes, we all agree, farmers first. But it is, as Birgit said, people first. And those people, if we're talking about nutrition, are primarily women, because women are the ones that are doing the cooking, they're the ones that are doing much of the growing, they're the ones that are going to prepare the meals and find the food for the meals. So we have to listen to their voices. And if we just go to the village and say we want to talk to farmers or want to talk to cooks or whatever, we won't necessarily talk to the women. It's not their job to come to meetings. We have to go to them. We have to understand what their needs are. Just one quick story from the Gates Foundation, who was going to fund a project in Ghana using radio in order to teach people how to grow tomatoes, a crop that the community wanted to learn how to grow. And so they planned all the radio shows, they planned everything about how it would work each week, telling people new things. And of course, the women are the ones that are going to be doing the planting. So they had one question. They knew everybody had a radio, but they had two really important questions to ask about the radio. One was, when do you listen to the radio? And the second question was, if the husband and wife listen to the radio at the same time, who controls the knob? So without the answer to that question being women, they were going to waste a lot of time on that program. So just an example to how to be sure to ask the questions that you need to ask and give access to the information to the people who are actually going to do the work if you want to be effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for sharing your insights, very useful information, inspiring experiences, good evidences as well. So today, we all agreed that the world is at a crucial turning point for agriculture and food systems. We should transform to benefit farmers, consumers, and life-supporting sustainable ecosystems. The agriculture sector is both vulnerable to climate change and a strong lever for greenhouse gas emission mitigation and adaptation. At the same time, we should achieve the goal of zero hunger by 2030. So therefore, governments, international organizations, farmers, consumers, private sector, and civil society all should play its part working together, as emphasized by all of you. So I'm sure that at this P4G summit, all P4G members confirm the commitment to take more targeted measures to reduce emissions and capture carbon in agriculture. Actions to improve productivity and efficiency are also necessary in food systems. Growing appropriate bioenergy crops to increase crop diversity and income, and developing future technology will be a great help. So I thank all panelists for your excellent contribution, and distinguished audience, thank you very much for your interventions. So my special thanks go to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs of the Republic of Korea, who organized this insightful session. So as I bring this session to the end, I wish all of you stay in a good health, and please enjoy the rest of the P4G Seoul Summit. Thank you for your joining. Thank you.